Christian, we cannot hear you.
Yeah. It's so strange that you are in these conferences and can't see people entering the room. So you have to imagine there's a room, there's a door to the right, and everybody is coming in now, sitting down, drinking coffee. We're small talking.
Yeah.
How was your flight to Moscow, Alexei?
The flight to Moscow was great. It was so strange to travel to different countries during this lockdown period.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was surprised. Vaccination works like a magic wand.
Yeah. And I don't know if I can. I used to find my way through airports across Europe blind. Now maybe they have changed everything. I was flying on holidays to Mallorca a couple of weeks ago. It's strange that you have to get rid of your luggage and go through security, and it's like new done. Valerie, how are you? You enjoyed lockdown because you have a small daughter.
Yeah, I think one of the few person that benefited from COVID in a way that I was able to work from home and my husband was able to work from home. So we both had time with our little daughter, and in my lunch breaks I can go down and just try to feed her with some funny things she does not want to eat. So yeah, for me somehow there was also a positive side of COVID. That was quite nice to work from home. And so, I'm wondering whether we will at some point all be back in the office or whether this is now the new normal. So let's see.
Yeah, it feels like since we haven't reopened, for example, like the London office, it's going to be, I'd say it's going to be meeting days and not permanently the office.
Yeah,
because I think as Exosol is growing so much, it's hard to keep the connection to everybody, and it's the small things that you want to discuss over a coffee and not with a Zoom meeting. That's important. How is it in Badoo in Bumble? You're so across everywhere. So are you completely on Zoom now, or do you go to the office? Well, how are you working with the new reality?
Yeah, we are spread worldwide, and in different locations we have different rules. The most flexible one is in Moscow. We just kind of reshaping the existing office into a co-working place or kind of co-working hub where we can book working places and meet each other when we need it.
Okay, that's good. I think that's the way it's going to work out in most of the places, that you do a little bit more project work. I don't know if everybody is seated, but I would assume that 3 minutes, 4 minutes might be a good time that we think about starting. To make it understand, Alexei is here to be our voice and our ears into the chat, because Valerie and myself don't speak Russian, so mine is limited to Rast 2 3 pivo, which gets me a beer sometimes, but it doesn't get me anywhere else. So Alexei will be watching the chat. So if something is interesting, he will unmute himself and be the translator into the system. And with this, I think we should give the signal to the organizers that we can start.
Mm-hmm.
Are we ready to go?
I think so.
Yeah, perfect. Then, welcome to this presentation, and let me start, as I will do the first talk-in, a quick introduction to myself. I'm Christian. I'm working in Exasol now for 6 years, or now a little bit over 6 years. But I know Exasol for a lot longer because before that, I was doing marketing and later channel sales for MicroStrategy. So I met Exasol roughly 10 years ago. The first customer we jointly had, and they also have a large installation in Russia. That's Adidas. And the other thing is, like, what is funny about myself is I have, if you follow my wife, I have by far too many bikes, as in cycles, from road cycles to mountain bikes and everything. You can see my contacts below. If you want to reach out to me, you are welcome to reach out to me. But what is special about all these bikes and differs from what Valerie does, all of my bikes have 2 wheels, a front wheel and a back wheel, and I'm quite proud of this. And with this, I would hand over to Valerie.
Thanks, Christian. Yes, as you can see on this picture, my bike usually only has 1 wheel. I love to unicycle in my free time. And when I'm working as a sales engineer at Exosol. I've been with the company for more than 3 years now. And I first got in contact with Exosol when I was still a working student at Adidas. And there, my task was to do some new fancy analysis on their brand new shiny Hadoop cluster. And I just started investigating the data, having no clue what happened there, was just running some random queries. And suddenly one of my colleagues came in quite quickly and said, "Valerie, what are you doing there? You're slowing down our production cluster. It almost crashed." And I was like, "Oh, okay, sorry. I just did a group by, didn't know that this would crash the cluster." And so I had to stop my query, and I was quite anxious for the next time starting something on the Hadoop system. And then one of my colleagues told me, "Well, we have another database. It's called Exosol, and it basically holds the same data, but I think it's quite stable. So try that one." And I started working with Exosol, and in the beginning I was quite cautious and tried small queries, and then I saw that, well, that really worked, and I didn't need to pay attention to running big queries that could crash everything. And so I was really relieved that I could just throw all my questions at the system and not crash it by just asking random queries. So that's where I really fell in love with how Exasol works and how stable it is. And since then, yeah, I love the technology.
Perfect. Then let us tell a little bit about Exasol, because Exasol might not be the best known database out there. But in following on what Valerie said, we had a customer where I talked to him quite recently and said, like, I was running this query and for lunch, I suddenly figured out, bloody hell, it has an auto join in there, and it's gonna crash the whole system because he used to be working with another system. And after coming back from lunch, he figured out that the system has built something like 1.5 petabyte of intermediate tables and then condensed the information again over 1.5 hours. He nearly took it out of the system, but it worked, and he got his result. And then so that's what he really smiled about, that it works. So what Exasol has been developed for from the start and from the direction that we're going, we always say we want to be the performance leader. From the history that we started, we always wanted to say, like, if you have an analytic need, you need to have it fast. Usually, Exasol is up to 100 times faster than what you expect. I remember when I started in Exasol, one of the first partners, one was a partner in Slovenia, and I knew him from my previous job in MicroStrategy, and said, like, Slavko, this thing is 1,000 times faster than what you have in-house. And he had an Netezza at the time working for a customer. And on the Monday, it took me weeks to convince him to try it. On the Monday, he said to me, "You are a liar. It was only 660 times faster." So we're still on good terms because it was fast enough to convince the customer and convince a couple of other customers as well. What it also means is, like, Exasol has been built on standard hardware, on Intel servers, and there's nothing fancy about the servers, which means that when you run queries on an optimized system like Exasol, it's cheaper. And we're just counting the hardware. We're not counting all the rest of it, because if every query runs fast, you can bypass many more queries than you used to have. That takes down the ownership cost of it all. And it also reduces the overhead that you need, because, and we're going to talk about a little bit later, as it's self-tuning, you need less people to maintain the system, so you can do a lot more with less. As we're saving on the hardware, as we're saving on the cost, Exasol can grow near linear. Being a German company, we say 99% is not linear, but you can grow quite significantly. Alexei, where Badoo is one case. Another one is Revolut, I'm going to talk about later on, who has like 500 times more data, 1,000 times more data now in the system than before. And with that, I would like jump to the next one. Where do you see Exasol in use? The most easiest and the most obvious is that you use it for BI acceleration. Why is that obvious? Because if you have an existing system that runs front end like Badoo, I think you're using or you were using MicroStrategy, or if you're using Tableau, the pain is with the end user. And they don't care if the system is slow or if it's the database not coming back. So if you can make the the front end smoother, easier, better to use for the end customer, there's where your advantage is. If you can avoid caching, if you can avoid building cubes, BI acceleration is the perfect way to start your journey into an Exasol. Take the most painful queries you have or the most painful ETL jobs, as we're also loading in parallel. That's the best place to start with an Exasol. What then usually happens is the first department says, hey, I have now this shiny new data warehouse like Valerie found out in Adidas. It used to be an hour that my query takes to run, and now it's 2 minutes. And then the next one says, like, well, mine is still running a half an hour. Why I'm still on the old system? And then you start to come up, and then you go out for data warehouse replacements, where let's say you replace your Netezza, you replace your Teradata, you start to go from an Exadata into an Exasol just to get the speed up there and the ease of use up there. If you have solved that, and one of our customers told me, only with Exasol taking the pain out of the IT department, like not anymore talking to angry internal customers, we had the time and the leisure to think about advanced solutions on Exasol. And one of the cases that we see quite often then is that's also what like Badu is doing and a couple of others is doing, bringing the analytics from your individual server to where the data resides, taking the analytics from outside into the database. Because why would you move data from where it resides now to an analytics cluster and then pump the results back into the database or in the front end if you can do all the calculations in the system? So that gets us quite wide. Go on, please. To talk about these marketing slides is always nice, but I think you need to have a couple of cases where you prove what you do. And as I said, like I came from MicroStrategy, so the first time I heard about Exasol was when MicroStrategy was running the actual POC in Adidas. At that time, MicroStrategy would have been required to get data out of an SAP BW system, and the connector was not giving us the results in the time so that we could survive the POC, because although it's a nice front end, it didn't feel nice because it was too slow. Funnily enough, one of the pre-sales, Hannes, he knew another guy in Nuremberg, and Adidas is very close to Nuremberg. So he said, like, oh, I heard there is this small database out of Nuremberg who claims to be very, very fast. And then we convinced in MicroStrategy, we convinced the Americans, yeah, let's use this database to test it out. Maybe we can just copy the data out of the BW into the Exasol and then make it run. And it worked, and it helped MicroStrategy to win the deal and become quite a big supplier to Adidas over time. And at the same time, we got established in Adidas as Valerie said, like as the fast performance layer on top of your existing data. And even then, they brought in SAP HANA at a later point because somebody worked at SAP, moved into Adidas. It's like everything is SAP HANA and it's a lot faster. But in the end, they and a couple of other customers figured out that the SAP HANA is built for analytics, but it hasn't, well, we refined the concept for a while. We're using very distributed hardware. And in the end, we've been faster, more stable, and cheaper in the long run. And now we're basically underneath everything. If you buy shoes online in Adidas, your recommendation for the second purchase will come from Exasol, or will come from an Exasol engine that's running. So we're replacing the SAS analytics that's on there to run the analytics in the system, and also all the standard reporting is coming out. Revolut is another case. Some of the former colleagues of Alexei, Dimi, he moved over out of Badu into Revolut, a very small startup at the time in London. He took one of our free community editions in a Docker, ran it in Google Cloud somehow, and helped the company to become truly data-driven. The community edition at the time supported 1 terabyte of data, and that was quite funny because he said, after a while, he came to us, by the way, we didn't tell you we installed an Exasol in production for a terabyte. It's a single node. I've been telling my boss that it can do a lot more, but we need to have it as a cluster. So we felt like, oh, you're in Google. We haven't done a Google cluster so far. So we had to scramble a little bit, but quite quickly got the cluster up and running. And since then, they moved from a terabyte on a small clustered system in the Google system. Now they have roughly half a petabyte and growing. And what is interesting about Revolut, each and single of their analysts does it in SQL directly against the database, and they're completely data-driven. Maybe the next one. IAZ is the Austrian banking center. It's like a central data hub for all the local Austrian banks and some of the health insurers and hospitals. They started their own databases. They're very, very IBM-minded. They started in '96. And then in 2014, they started a renovation project. Usual suspects, an Oracle, an IBM, a SAP HANA, because you always have to have a SAP HANA in there. And then, I don't know what it was. And like the fifth one was an Exasol, because one of the partners there heard that there is an Exasol out there. Basically, we've just been asked to join the POC as a fifth contender, just to have somebody in, to have like 5 contenders. That quickly changed. The rest was kicked out quite quickly. We were stable. One of the examples they gave us why they really liked us, from Exasol, there was like 2 guys, Matze and I think it was Franz at the time, who drove there with a car, and they had the whole server infrastructure in the back of the car. And at the same time, IBM was asking where they should park the lorry. So they came with a full truck of hardware and put it into the system, and the guys just came there, plugged it together, installed it, and it worked. They liked it so much that in the end, they decided for Exasol, keep it running, and they had a project, they called it IT Renovation 2020. And in 2018, they gave us a call. By the way, the project finished a little bit too early. We are running out of licenses. Please sell us more licenses. We're 2 years ahead of time. So we were speeding up. They're using it for regulatory reporting, for the loading. And what also they said is what they really like about Exasol is our support. There's a current bug review where we received a full 10 at the support, and I said if I have an issue, because something always goes wrong, if you have an issue with an Exasol, I don't even start to panic, because by the time I have connected enough data and log files and whatever to pass the first level support of your competitor, we already talked to your research and development, and we're working on fixes. So it eases the mind of the IT department that we are a small company, and maybe also a German company, and we rely on good service. Next one, please. Usually you talk about huge customers. And the other side of it is like Hahn Air, which is the second largest German airline that you have never heard of, because they have basically 2 planes. But they use it you can buy tickets, and it's an interesting concept. You can buy tickets from anywhere in the world to anywhere in the world with one co-chair ticket, because they're part of the IATA, which is interesting for companies who have international travel from, let's say, St. Petersburg to somewhere in South America. You can book one ticket and you don't have to have multiple tickets. So it's a lot easier for the agencies to book it. They're quite small. They're concentrated on this rebilling and reselling service. So the profitability analysis is something that is key to the company. And it turned out last year with COVID, losing 90% of the air travel, being able to closely work with the data all the time makes them still profitable and gives them a chance to survive better. So they had built their internal IT systems on Microsoft SQL. One of our partners brought in a small Intel NUC with a demo version, and the reporting time for the most complicated report went from 8 minutes to 6 seconds. The IT department said, that can't be, it must be a huge server, we have to find it, we can tune our Microsoft SQL, we can double it and do it. And they got it down to, let's say, a minute. But still we were at 6 seconds. After 6 months, and it took really 6 months, that the CFO of the company said, I'm not having this. Why would you keep tuning something? Why would you keep flogging a dead horse if there's something there that is better? And he decided on installing a small version of Exasol. More and more workloads moved to the Exasol. They decided to go for a clustered version just to be sure that data is not. Before, usually you have one server is fine. If it goes down, it's just the analytics database. Until you figure out how important your analytics have become over time. So you go for a clustered versions and you need it, and it's not allowed. I think like an Exasol is the only system that is not business critical, but if it goes down, it's the big pain that you have. Funny side story: we had one customer who phoned in, my system is down. And I said, like, yeah, what did you do? Yeah, we're working on version 4.2, and it had an uptime of 1,066 days, but now the system is not reacting anymore. It's like, well, you didn't switch off your system for 3 years. You didn't do a system patch. You didn't do a security. Yeah, sorry, we forgot about it. It just kept running and it was smooth, so we didn't touch it. So we had to find a way to upgrade them to a current version, but they got solved anyway. Cool. And with that, and before I talk too much, because it's going to be hard to get into it, I will hand over to Valerie to talk about the details and dirty bits in the black box.
Thank you, Christian. So now Christian has told us a lot about Exosol and that it's so fast. And I've prepared here to show you a performance comparison so that you get an impression. We compared Exosol to 3 other systems. So here you can see Amazon Redshift, Azure Synapse, and Snowflake, so all cloud systems. And we decided to do a comparison here on a dataset of 4 billion rows of retail data that is placed in a star schema. And to test the performance, a simple query routine will be run on each of them. So let me see whether I can get the video running here. If it does not work, you can watch it afterwards. Okay, works great. So you can see here on the bottom that we start Snowflake and Redshift and Azure, and then as the last one, we start Exasol. And actually, we drill down to the state of Georgia, like you can see here on the left upper side of Exasol. And in Georgia, we will drill down to a specific store. And from that store, drill down to a specific category. So that's one of the typical workflows your users will do when they use dashboards. And with Exasol, we are already in the small state of Dalton, drilling down, home goods category, and we are almost done, while the others are still somewhere in Georgia trying to catch up. And I won't show you the whole video because it would just now take 4 minutes to watch the competition finish. But I think it gives you a good impression of how important it is to have a fast database system when you want to analyze your data. Because your users, they want to use interactive reporting and not sit there waiting for hours. And actually here we tried to size all the systems quite equally. So we compared the price of the systems because some of them don't give away the exact hardware. And so we decided to go for systems that all cost around the same. Like you can see here, Exosol is even a little bit at a disadvantage because it's slightly cheaper than the other systems. But for the query routine in total, Exosol takes 30 seconds to finish, while the next one takes 1 minute and 45. So I think that gives you a good impression of how fast Exosol can actually be for analytics. And actually, the video is on YouTube. So if you search for Exasol built for speed, like it says here in the title, you can watch the whole video with some voice overlay again. So we've heard Exasol is a nice system. It's fast, doesn't cost that much. It's easy to administrate, and it even stops our customers from smoking. So now we know why we want to use Exasol, but the question is, how does Exasol do this? And when we were invited to this conference, I was told Exasol is a great system and we love it, but your product is a black box. And no one really knows what's inside of that black box. That could be like anything, black magic, ninja cats, whatever. We don't know what the system does. It works, but I don't trust anything that, I don't know how it works. So for today, my goal is to lift the lid off that black box and show you that it's actually not a red box, but a pretty nice green box with a lot of cool stuff in it. So let's do a technical deep dive and understand how Exasol works and what makes it special. The reason Exasol is so fast is that our architecture is built for analytical performance, and it was built for that from the very first day. So you can see here, the first thing is Exasol is an MPP system. That means it has multiple data nodes that all work in parallel on resolving your query. And each node contains an exclusive part of the data. So if we have a look at one table, this table will be distributed to the different data nodes, each holding a small exclusive part of the data. As it's a shared nothing architecture, all the nodes work independently. So there is no master node that has more work to do than the others. All nodes are equal, and that makes it so nice because you can really run Exasol on commodity hardware. When having a look at one node in detail, what can we see how Exasol works there? Well, the first thing is that Exasol is a columnar database. This means we don't store data row-wise like the most other databases do, but we store it in a columnar format. And this is great for analytics because for analytics, you need a number cruncher. You usually don't want to know where Paul Smith lives and want to see his address, but you want to group something on revenue and you want to have all the revenue values together. And that's where a columnar format is really optimal because that can deliver performance for analytics out of the box. Actually, Exasol does not only work in a columnar format, but also the data is stored in data blocks. That's something you as a user won't see. Just under the hood, it's stored in data blocks. And when a query comes in from the front end, Exasol will load the data into memory that it needs to answer this query. And it will only load over the data that is relevant for this query. In memory, it will hold all the data that is needed, so the hot data. So Exasol is an in-memory system. And when I say in-memory system, people think, okay, in-memory system is nice, it's fast, but it's expensive. That's not the case for Exasol because we only need around 10% of your raw data as RAM. So if you have a system that should hold 10 terabyte of uncompressed data, we would only need 1 terabyte of RAM. Why is that? Exasol has an intelligent caching algorithm that predicts what data will be used next and already loads that data into the RAM level. So if your query comes in, you will have all the hot data that is required for that query in memory, and the cold data, like the data from the last 10 years that you rarely touch, it will reside on the disk and not be loaded into memory. And that's where the performance benefit Exasol can offer comes from. For small tables, Exasol has a cool feature that even helps to speed up the whole process, and that is replication. Because you usually do a lot of joins in your queries, and joins need to move the data around. But if you have small tables, they will be replicated to every data node so that the joins can then be made local and take up less time. And how do you do that? That's a one-time setup you have to do. You just define a replication border, like the parameter we can see here at the bottom. You just define the replication border in number of rows, and then everything that is smaller than this replication border will be replicated across the node. Every table that is bigger than that will be distributed. So this makes it ideal for data that is in some kind of star schema distribution, because then you can have the large fact table distributed and all the smaller dimension tables, they will be replicated to make joins local and even deliver a little bit more performance out of the box. So that's one of the few screws or knobs you can turn to make Exasol even a little bit faster. So what have we heard so far? Exasol is columnar database, and the columnar format is ideal for analytics because it guarantees that you have short access times for information that is needed to gather. It's an in-memory system. It manages hot and cold data automatically for fast results. And this gives you the ability to analyze more data in less time. And it's an MPP system, so the queries will be distributed. And again, that's something Exasol does automatically. You just write your SQL statement, send it to the database, and Exasol does everything in the background. And it's a self-tuning database. When I looked at the program of this conference, I saw that on the first day there was a talk called Lessons Learned from Using Machine Learning to Optimize Database Configurations, which is basically around tuning your database. So you can see that there's a huge need for finding ways to tune the database more easily. And a self-tuning database is the best thing you can get because there is no tuning involved and no tuning you need to do. It just runs out of the box. Regarding the deployment, where can you use Exasol? It can either be deployed on-premise in your system using standard commodity hardware, nothing special. You can go to a public cloud like AWS, Azure, and Google and host your Exasol system there. Or you can book ExaCloud, which is our database as a service offering where you just get your database connection and we take care of everything else. So you're really flexible there. And that is also something our customers can benefit from, that you really can go to whatever environment is best for your data strategy, whether you want to keep everything on premise or go to the cloud. We can follow you, and there is no vendor lock-in for these environments. So now I promised you a lot of cool things, and everyone can promise cool things like an unknown flight object or whatever cool is out there. But the only thing like you will believe what I do is by seeing it yourself, because seeing is believing. And that's why I prepared a short demo so that I can show you some basic parts of Exasol and how that works. The dataset we are working with is from the banking sector. It contains transactions and some other tables that are linked to that. As you can see here, it's more or less a star schema. And with Exasol, you don't need a flat table. You can just join your tables together. That's also something we sometimes see with customers, that at first they are afraid to just do the joins because other database systems crash when you do too many joins, like I have that on the Hadoop system. But with Exasol, that is not a problem. You can do that. So a star schema is ideal. And even if you want to go for a data vault model where you have a lot of joins, go for it. The data set we're working with is quite big. The transactions table has 1 billion rows. The accounts and the clients table has each like 11 million rows. And yeah, so you can see that we have the large fact table and the smaller dimension tables. And on my demo system, the replication border is set in a way that you have the large fact table distributed across all the nodes, and the smaller dimension tables will be replicated. So the plan for today is to load some data from Oracle and just run some queries on our newly loaded data set. And why do I start with data loading? Well, I wanted to show you that I haven't prepared anything fancy in the background. It's just really the database, and it delivers the performance out of the box. So the first thing we will do is to create our tables, then load the data and start querying it. And for loading the data, we actually have a repository in our GitHub profile. So you will see a lot of GitHub projects around Exosol. Wherever it is possible, we open source the things we do. And here we have a repository that has a bunch of scripts for migrating data over from other systems to Exosol that will help you do the mapping of the different data types and just get all the data over easily. So I will just copy that script over and take it to my SQL editor with me. Let me just put it in here. And the first thing I will do is to create that script that will later on help me do the migration. Okay, created. Next thing we need is a connection to the source system. So that is like you create a connection to another system from Exosol. You just create a simple Jdbc connection by defining the connection string, the user word, and the password. I won't execute the statement now because I didn't want to let you see my Oracle password. So that's why I put an X here. But I already created it with my proper password. And once it is created, we can see that this connection works by doing a simple import statement and just saying connection works. Okay, we are connected to the Oracle system. So the next thing we want to do is to get our data over. And for that, we take the migration script and execute it. Well, let's do it here. So in the migration script that we copied over, at the bottom of it, we have an example of how to use it. I'll just copy it in so that I don't do any typos in here. We specify the connection name and the schema we want to load from. So it's the ATM data, and I'll execute that. And this will now build up a connection to the Oracle environment, get all the information about the tables DDL from the Oracle metadata tables, and hand it over back to me. So I'll copy the whole result set that we can see down here and take it to a new editor tab. And we can see that it created some statements for us for creating the schema, for creating all the tables with a proper Exosol DDL, and even the import statements to fill up the data. So let's do the create tables first. Before I do that, I will show you that the schema is really empty, no tables in there. And let's create all the tables. And when we import the data, I'll just leave out the big transactions table for now, because that's okay. That would run like 45 minutes, and I don't want you to watch me importing data for 45 minutes. So we will import the smaller ones, like this. Start that. And for the big transactions table, we will copy that over from another schema, so that we also have that in our system. And when we look at how this statement performs, we can see that the small table is already there. The client's table with the 11 million rows should take around 30 seconds to import, and same for the other table. In the meantime, I can show you another script that we have on our GitHub page.
Valerie, as you said, 45 minutes for copying it over, and as Exasol is fast, how much data do we have in that system? How many rows does it have?
That is the large fact table with the 1 billion rows.
Okay. So it's allowed to take a little bit longer.
It's allowed to take longer, and it's not Exasol's fault. It's just that you have to get the network bandwidth in between somewhere. That's why I don't do that. But yeah, for getting these 11 million rows, we did that in 30 minutes. And if you want to do a proof of concept with your own data, even having it run for 40 minutes to just get everything in, I think is okay.
I should add that from my experience, Exosol is never a bottleneck of data import. I would say that the bottleneck would be on the Oracle side to export this data, but not to import.
Yeah, exactly. That's also what we experienced. You have to be careful depending on the source system. You might crash the source system by pulling over too much data from the source system. So never put 30 processes in parallel to load to the source system that can't handle it. In the GitHub repository, we have other scripts that you can afterwards use for migrating over things like the primary keys. As time passes on quickly, I'll skip that for today. But just so you know, in these database migration repositories, there is a lot you can look at and just try out to get cool things with Exosol to start off in the beginning. So we have the data in our system now. Like we can see that all these tables are there and they are filled with content. Now I want to see whether there are already any indices on the system. Because you might say, Valerie told me it's a self-tuning system. Did it tune anything yet? So let's check the indices table, whether there is anything yet. We can see no, it's empty. Okay, no indices yet. So I'll start querying our system. And I'll just do a simple query that joins together two tables, the transactions table and the areas table. And it will count the entries by the cities and get us the top three cities with the most transactions that were done there. So let's run the statement and see how long it takes. Okay, it took us 11 seconds now to run that. And let's again look at the tables with the indices and see whether we have any indices there. And now we can see there is an index on the table. It is on the column area ID of the big transactions table. Okay, how did it get there? Let's have a look at the explain of the statement. And with Exosol, there is no explain plan you can see up front, but you can get a profile of a query that you've run. So I'll just flush out my statistics and get the explain plan from that statement. And we can see here that it did compile and execute. And that's what happens with live demos. The part of building up the index is missing in that statement. It should be there. Let me check again. Okay. Usually that should be there. So let's just quickly drop that index so that we can see that. So Once again, we run the statement. And then we will get an explain plan that will show us how the index was built up. Okay, let me just switch over to my backup slides. I don't know what happened there. As I said, that's what you have when you work with live demos. But I think that makes it a live demo when you see that something can go wrong. What you should usually see here is that you have a step called index create that takes around 3 seconds, and that builds up that new index on the system. And now if we run that statement once again, we should see that this query now is faster. And it took less than 1 second. Okay, wait.
Valerie, yeah, many databases cache the results. If this query reused the result from cache.
Exactly, that's what I wanted to show. So let me just copy everything to a new tab. I think I just had some things in there open from the last one. I'm sorry for that. So what we can see now is that the query was executed again, and it took less than 1 second. And like Alexei already pointed out, why is that the case? We can see that in the explain once again. Okay, my explain statement is somehow broken. Let me just pull up the backup again. What you should usually see there is that you have a step in there that says it's a cached query result, and that's why it's so fast. Because that's another thing that Exasol does. If you have exactly the same query again, it will store the result of that and give it back if the underlying data hasn't changed in the meantime. And why is that a cool feature? Well, if you have users coming from front-end tools, they will send the exact same query with the exact same parameters again. So it's a good thing to store the results for that. But if you don't want to have the query cache for testing purposes like we have here, there is a statement that lets me turn that off and say, no, I don't want to use that query cache now. And now if I run that statement again, it should take longer than the query cache, but it takes 2 seconds now instead of the 10 that it took when it needed to build up the index in the beginning. And if we look at the profile again, let's see whether it works this time. Yeah, here it works. Then we can see that here in the statement, we have the join, and the join uses the newly created index here. And there is no index creation step in it anymore. So that's why, yeah, it's faster now. And now you might say, well, it's nice if it builds up indices automatically, but what about maintaining these indices? At a certain point, we need to add data to our system. And that's also something that Exasol does automatically for you. If data changes, if you insert, update, or delete data, the index will also be updated. And after around 5 weeks of not using the index at all, the index will be dropped. So you can be sure that your system will never be loaded with old unused indices, and that indices will always be built up when they are needed for a join, or if you define primary keys on the table, that's also a hint that Exasol takes for building up an index on that specific column automatically for you. So for tuning an Exasol database, you can define a replication border for replicating the small tables across all the nodes. You can set primary and foreign keys to give Exasol a hint to create indices on that columns. And you can distribute large columns by setting a distribution key that tells it how to distribute it. But that's basically everything you need to do on an Exasol system to tune it. That's it. You just set it up, run it, and it works. We also have a part about data science prepared.
And I would say, let's do this. Let's go into it. Let's do it quickly, and I will rush the rest. So I think data science is more interesting than me.
Okay, I'll try to also speed up a little bit here. So Exasol is not only an analytical database where you can run your data warehouse queries, but you can also run data science in Exasol. And we believe that it's really important to bring your algorithm to the data instead of bringing the data to the algorithm like you would usually do when you're working with an analytical database. So that's why Exasol built in user-defined functions that can help you run actual code in your database. And we'll directly jump to the deep dive part of how that works in Exasol. So the code I can write with an Exasol database can either be in Python, in R, or in Lua, and I can write some functions there. I can use any library that I want with any language basically that I want. And that is also a benefit that you have with Exasol, because you can see here on that page that we have some language containers running on the different nodes. And these containers, they contain everything, all the libraries that you need for a certain project. So if you say, I need something with TensorFlow version whatever, you can specify exactly that version, build a language container with exactly this library in it, and deploy to the Exasol system. And that way, as data scientists, you can run exactly what you need with Exasol. On the database side, we use ZeroMQ and protobuf so that the language containers can talk to the database to get some data, but the code that is executed stays in these containers, so it's safe to execute it on the database environment. And there is no way that this container can take over the Exasol database and do some dirty stuff in there. And on the disk level, we have a distributed file system called ExaBucketFS that is replicated across all the data nodes, and that can help you to deploy your data science models across your system. Let me think. Yeah, I'll quickly show you something regarding a data science model. So I have created a data science model for fraud prediction, and I have uploaded that model into my Exasol system, into the BucketFS of it. So the model is just a really simple random forest model that was developed in our studio with a small sample data set of data. And now I want to execute that small that model on the whole data set. So for that, I can upload it to a bucket, and I did this. We can see that it's on the Exasol system in that folder. Just a quick reconnect to my demo system. So we can see that we have that model lying in there called fraud model, as I said, a simple random forest model. And now I can create a user-defined function. In this case, it's written in R, could also be written in Python, that makes use of this model and will apply it to the whole data set that I have on my Exasol database. So we will create that script. And I'll just quickly show you that we can execute this on our fraud data set here. And I know that I'm rushing through a little bit because we're running out of time. So I would propose that I will, if you're interested, I will give that out to you later after the talk so that you can have a look at how this works in detail in your own pace afterwards. So we have the table here in the fraud prediction schema. It's a table with credit card data, and it was anonymized by a PCA. So if you look at the data, it doesn't look human readable anymore to keep the anonymity of the data set. And we can run that prediction right here on the database. And the cool thing is we could then not only predict live on the whole big data set and run that in 7 seconds, but I can also create a view out of it. And with that view, I could use that view in a front-end tool to allow my end users to go from their Tableau, MicroStrategy, Power BI, whatever, to the database and involve a live prediction into their reports there. So I'll hand over to Christian.
Cool. And as I said, like coming from the front end, it was always the topic. You can contain a prediction in, let's say, in a MicroStrategy dashboard or in a mobile report. But what if you could base this of actual data that has just been uploaded to the database? So run your model and you get a real next best action just in the front end to make it amazing. Wrap it up. What sets us apart? German company, decent support. We automatically manage the data in the system, what to put in the memory, what not to put in the memory to limit the amount of resources that you need. We're massive parallel, so you could run on very small servers, on very cheap servers, but many of them. That gives you a better advantage to do it, and you easily scale out horizontally. We just add the same server again, and it will run. And we offer it on premise. We offer it on cloud. We offer it in our own data center and also hybrids, because there's sometimes the thing that you have some parts of your application sitting in the cloud in certain regions, but you're not allowed to put other data outside of your on-premise installation or outside of the country. And with Exasol, you can mix on-site and cloud workloads to optimize it for your needs. Next one, please. So in the beginning, I promised Exasol stops customers from smoking. How did that work? And it was just an anecdote that somebody told me. And if you could hit the button. And what happened, we had a developer who was in one of our training courses and said, like, you know, I used to work on an Oracle system and I ran a query and I knew it's going to take me 8-10 minutes. So I got up, walked outside and had a smoke with everybody else who was waiting for queries. I came back, sat down, did the next iteration and worked it. And then we switched to this bloody Exasol system. I hit the button and the result is there. And I didn't have time to go out for a smoke. So I started my next query. First, it made me work a lot harder because I had to work on all those queries. And in the end, I figured out I'm not able to smoke anymore because there's no breaks in my tool. So in the end, he said, like, in the end, Exasol kept me for smoking. But next one, please. I like one more clicks. Could it even give you more time for your family? And this is a tweet that we had from one of our experts he said like he used his evenings to optimize and run ETL jobs from his existing SQL server into the front end. He's using Tableau for that. And I said like, while he was waiting for 1.5 hours and secretly he told me he used to sit down, open a bottle of wine, wait for the ETL job to work, doing some backups if it doesn't work to restart the query. So he tweeted a couple of years ago, so like he wrote the same query against Exasol and he completed it in 33 seconds. And he said like, my wife is happier because I'm at home and I'm not busy with work. And he also said like, he stopped me from drinking too much because by the time I used to drink a bottle of wine during the ETL job, I just pop the cork and it's done. And that only gets me one glass and it's fine. So Exasol stops you from smoking, keeps you from drinking, but still makes your life a lot easier because you can relax as it works, self-tuning. Next one. My name is Christian and I'm the head of the community, so I always have to mention the community. Please join us in the community if you have questions. If Valerie promised something that you don't understand or that you don't know deeper, you can go to the community and ask. If you want to learn more about Python Exasol, which has been written by our colleague of Alexei Vitali from Purdue, he's also in the community. So we're working around that. And then also, if you want to try it out, there's also a Docker version that you can download from our GitHub or a full VMware that you can actually use in production up to 200 gigabyte to do it. So don't trust us, try it for yourself. Go to our page, download a Docker image, download a VMware, download an ISO file to install it. If you maybe want to run it for a small business or do your first reports a little bit quicker, if you're bored with Tableau extracts, if you're bored with MicroStrategy iCubes or caching it somewhere else, download it, try it. If you have questions, send us. If you want to try it for real, we can later discuss it in the discussion, or just reach out to us and Valerie and our partners locally will happily organize a proof of concept for you. And then, are there any questions? Alexei, you said you have questions.
I guess we are running out of time, and my suggestion is to move all the questions into the discussion room. And right now, probably we should say thank you to Valerie, to Christian for this amazing speech. So let's meet in the questions room, in the discussion room.
Let's grab a beer outside and then go for the question room. Now, we're going to see you over in the discussion forum. And with this, Valerie, anything to add? Last words? Try us.
No, see you in a second.
And then we're done with this. And thank you and shut off then. Thanks.